So I hear you're stuck in debt hell because of some futile fertility treatments. A few years after our divorce, my ex-husband came up to me with a sarcastic smile. We were in a famous wine country and had unexpectedly run into each other. It's pathetic, really. All that effort for nothing. He scoffed, looking down on me. After our divorce, he had remarried and been blessed with children, living contentedly with his family and thinking of himself as a winner, while mocking me. And whose story might that be? I replied, patting my slightly swollen belly. I wonder who really needs fertility treatments. Little did he know, he was about to discover a shocking truth. No matter how much he ranted or clung to me, it was too late for regrets. The beginning of his life's downfall was unfolding. The false happiness he had from his mistaken beliefs was crumbling down with a crash. Those who attain happiness and those who miss it. Our encounter would sharply delineate the fortunes of our respective futures. My name is Mary, and I work at a travel agency counter. I propose various plans to customers who come in, arranging trips that leave them satisfied. I find great fulfillment in such work. Stephen and I got married after a workplace romance. He joined my branch as the new manager, a man of very calm demeanor who always treated me with a kind smile. During busy seasons like summer holidays, overtime increased, and we often worked late into the night together. Between tasks, we'd get excited about fun conversations or encourage each other through tough times, and gradually, the time we spent together increased. Eventually, we became aware of each other and started dating, which led to marriage. After marriage, I was transferred to another branch. Working at a travel agency means lots of overtime, and it's tough. You've worked hard without a complaint up till now. Once we're married, it's okay to relax a bit and be a homemaker, my husband said, showing concern, which made me feel incredibly happy. However, I found my work rewarding and had a dream I absolutely wanted to realize. For that dream, I had lived a frugal life and saved up money. So I decided to continue working even after marriage. My husband respected my feelings, and so we both devoted ourselves to working at different branches. Understanding each other's work, we returned home every evening to comfort and toast one another, enjoying such simple happiness. 2 years into our marriage, I started to feel a bit anxious. As 2 years passed, without conceiving a child, I lost my parents when I was a child. When I was a student, growing up as an only child, there were many times I felt lonely. Because of that, I always dreamed of being part of a big family. So after getting married, I wanted to have at least 2 kids, not necessarily a large brood, but definitely more than one. There's no need to rush. They will come when the time is right. He was receptive to my feelings and agreed on starting a family. I wonder if I might be infertile. Maybe I should get checked out at the hospital, I said, looking downhearted. Don't be so hard on yourself. Everything's gonna be okay. But if it will ease your mind, go ahead and see the doctor, my husband said, gently stroking my hair. He always understood me. I was so touched I almost cried. Then I started visiting the OBGYN and went through several tests. After numerous tests, they didn't find anything wrong with me. That's great news, there's nothing wrong, my husband said happily, looking at the test results. See? What did I tell you? There's no need to worry. The baby will come when it's ready. His kind smile saved me more times than I could count. I felt so much lighter. Next up is the test for you. It's a short procedure, so maybe you could squeeze it in during a work break. It's likely that my husband won't have any issues either, but just to be safe, I wanted him to get tested. Of course, I was confident that my husband would readily agree. Why should I get tested? Infertility is usually a woman's issue, and it's pointless for me to do it. My husband's response caught me off guard. It might seem pointless, but just as a precaution. Besides, if it turns out to be an issue on the man's side, there are treatments available. Won't you consider it? I could see my husband's expression cloud over. I understood his reluctance to get tested. If there was a problem found, it could be a blow to his pride as a man. It was a delicate issue, and I knew pushing him wouldn't be right. There's no rush when you have the time. But my husband remained silent. The day ended without another word on the subject. One day, we went to visit my husband's family home. It was my mother-in-law's birthday, and we brought her a bouquet and a gift. When my husband was a child, his father had an affair, and then disappeared. Since then, my mother-in-law had to raise my husband by herself. I heard she had gone through a lot of hardships. My mother-in-law turned 65 this year, and finally retired after years of hard work. Never skimping on raising her children along the way, I've always respected her. Respected her as a woman for that. I hope she can now spend her days happily and at ease. That's what I was thinking. The bouquet and gift, I was sure she'd be thrilled with them. With that conviction, I opened the front door of my in-laws' house. Well, hello there, my mother-in-law greeted us with a bright smile. Oh, what beautiful flowers. And this is a bath set. I'm so touched you remembered how much I love my baths. Just as I thought, she was delighted. It should have been a pleasant time for the three of us from there on out. But then, I'm happy about the gifts and flowers, but I'm starting to look forward to seeing a grandchild's face, she said, and the mood changed in an instant. I was at a loss for words and glanced at my husband, but he stayed silent. Mary, I understand you're busy with work, but there are more important things than work, aren't there? You need to face your own health and think about starting a family. There are fertility treatments available nowadays. I have faced my health issues. I've been tested, and there was no problem found. I want to hold a dear grandchild in these arms soon. Mary, I'm waiting, you know. She meant it too. Why is it always assumed that the woman is to blame for infertility? Why is nothing ever said to my husband? Yes, I couldn't bring myself to argue. I was afraid it would cause a rift between my mother-in-law and me. I wished my husband would speak up and explain properly, but he remained silent all along. It felt like the blame for not having children was being put entirely on me. I'm expecting to hear the good news of a baby on the way by my next birthday. Those words weighed heavily on me. Being given a deadline just makes me all the more anxious. I kept telling myself not to worry, but my mother-in-law's words echoed in my head constantly. I can't remember a thing from the conversation that followed. As evening fell, we left my in-laws' place. On the way home, my husband and I walked shoulder to shoulder in silence. The setting sun cast our long shadows on the sidewalk. I kept my eyes on those shadows the whole way. What could he be thinking right now? How did he take what his mother said today? I wanted to ask, but I couldn't. No, I was afraid to. Afraid I'd be crushed by his words again. We arrived home without a word. I'm starved. Let's get dinner started, my husband said as if nothing had happened. He was probably planning to end the day without touching on how I felt. I gathered my courage and broke the silence. Hey, Stephen, about what your mom said today. He turned to me with his usual smile. What? What about it? Is that smile of his fake? She said she wanted grandkids, didn't she? I looked straight at my husband. Yeah, but since we can't have them, we just gotta wait, right? No, that's not what I'm trying to say. You were the one telling me to prioritize my health over work and to consider fertility treatments. I faced the issue head-on and got tested, and there was nothing wrong. My husband's expression began to change. Why didn't you say anything back then? It feels like it's all being blamed on me. But it's not me who's not facing the issue. It's you, isn't it, Stephen? I hadn't intended to say it like that. But once I started, the words just wouldn't stop. All my pent-up frustration exploded. What the heck? Always talking about tests? I already told you that. The cause of infertility is often on the woman's side. And what Mom said wasn't wrong. It's not my fault. My husband shouted, his face turning red. This wasn't the man I knew. I know it's not your fault, Stephen. It's wrong to blame anyone for infertility. I just want us to move forward. Whether we go through treatment or not, we need to start with the tests. No matter how much we argued, neither of us would accept the other's point of view, and we remained at a stalemate. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm hungry. I'm gonna go get something to eat. With that, my husband left the house. I was left alone in the quiet room. Suddenly, I felt all the strength leave my body, and I slumped down on the sofa. The image of my husband shouting came back to me. Was it my fault? I didn't mean to make my kind husband angry. That wasn't my intention. I just wanted to be understood. I wanted to work together to carve out our future. That's why I wanted the tests. I couldn't stop crying. In the quiet room, only the sound of my sobbing echoed. The next morning, my husband came home silently. You said you were just going out to eat. Where did you spend the night? I was worried. My husband wouldn't even listen to my words. It doesn't matter. Leaving just that one phrase hanging in the air, my husband left for work. It was our first big fight. These things happen. I thought he'd be in a better mood by this evening. With that hope, I too headed off to work. All morning I could only sigh. But my husband's mood didn't seem to improve no matter how many days passed. He started leaving the house earlier than before and returning home later. On weekends, he'd leave without notice and not return until late at night. He would leave without saying a word and come back only after I had gone to bed. The times we used to spend just the two of us had drastically reduced. It felt like he was avoiding me. I no longer knew how to approach him. Gradually, this silent living became our new normal. I can't even remember the times when we used to cherish our moments together. What made us this way? Was it so wrong to suggest that test? And finally, my husband stopped coming home. Lately, you've been away a lot. Where are you staying? We talked with our backs turned to each other. I've been swamped at work and always missed the last train, so I stay at a business hotel near the office, he said, his back also turned to me. I see. And then he went off to the bedroom. At some point, my bed had become the couch in the living room. The excuse of work being too late to come home doesn't add up. It's not even the busy season. My husband is hiding something. It became a reality a few weeks later. My husband would come home every few days, dump a load of laundry for me to do, then he'd pack his freshly washed underwear and clothes into his bag and scurry off. He could at least wash these himself. I muttered to myself as I loaded my husband's laundry into the machine. That's when I heard something drop with a clink. I looked on the floor, but nothing was there, but I was sure I heard something. I searched again more carefully this time. What could have fallen? It was when I stepped back that I saw something glinting at my feet. Here it is. What's this? I picked up the shimmering object and placed it in my hand. Oh, I was at a loss for words. The shining object in my palm was a small earring. For a moment, my mind went blank, but I was not as shocked as I thought I'd be. It was obvious to anyone when he stopped coming home. My husband was having an affair. Somewhere in my heart, I had this suspicion. But I was afraid to face the truth and pretended not to care. I just didn't want to hurt myself. But now, faced with reality, I can't run anymore. I've decided to confront my husband squarely. I decided to confront my husband squarely to grasp the proof of his affair and end our marriage. The next day, I headed to a private investigator. A few days later, my husband's affair was out in the open. The other woman was a new employee at the branch office where he worked. Around the time our marriage started to crack, this young and pretty employee joined the company. With his trademark calm demeanor and kind smile, my husband charmed this female employee. He got close to her by being her mentor at work, and it seems they became involved. It was new to me, but apparently my husband had made moves on various female employees before. Using his position as a superior, he would sweet-talk women, getting close to them. That was his clever tactic. I was just one of the women who had fallen for his scheme. The reason he chose me as a marriage partner was probably because I was convenient for him. Frustration welled up inside me. I decided it's time to end this life. That night, as usual, my husband came home with a heap of laundry. You might as well have her do your laundry at her place instead of coming all the way home, I said to his back. He stopped and turned around. What are you talking about? He asked. I told you it's work. Then he looked at me with a cold stare. Is this what work is to you? What exactly are you teaching this female employee after hours? I shoved several photos in front of my husband. The photos showed the two of them leaving the workplace and entering the apartment where the female employee lived alone. What's this? My husband seemed unable to hide his surprise. Don't play dumb with me. I've dug up everything. And these earrings, weren't they the ones she was looking for? They were caught on your shirt. He froze as he looked at the earrings resting on my palm. I never thought you were such a womanizer. Let's just end this. Now you can date her openly. With that, I handed him the divorce papers. A tense silence filled the air. He stared at the divorce papers, shock written all over his face. Then suddenly he burst into laughter. "What's this? Sour grapes? Are you jealous because we can't have kids? If you've got time to take pictures like these, why not focus on getting treatment so you can get pregnant?" He had the audacity to say that. Who's really full of sour grapes here? I struggled to contain my rising anger. "Divorce? That suits me fine. She's pregnant. I've been wanting to cut ties with you, ASAP. I'm only thinking about my new family now." To top off his affair, he got her pregnant. What a reckless man. I was at a loss for words. And so we got divorced. It was an anticlimactic end. He took only the bare essentials and left. I also decided to move out of the rental condo we had lived in together. After finishing the lease termination, I was cleaning up the apartment. Everything my husband left behind went straight into trash bags. I didn't have a shred of nostalgia. Just then the doorbell rang. Who could it be at a time like this? I slowly opened the front door. Outside the door, there stood a man alone. His hair was unkempt, and he wore dirty clothes. He was a man I had never seen before. He greeted me and began to speak. His words left me astonished. 3 years had passed since then. After my divorce, I continued to save diligently, and finally, I reached my savings goal. I had made my dream come true, and so I quit my job at the travel agency. One day, I was walking through a wine country. It was one of the US's most famous wine countries. Wine tasting at vineyards was popular, and I saw people walking around happily. Also, recently, new sweet shops and cafes had sprung up, making it popular with the younger crowd. I loved the lively atmosphere here so much that I moved nearby. While enjoying a stroll in the lovely weather, I heard a familiar voice calling my name from behind. Who could that be? I turned around, and to my surprise, I was at a loss for words at the sight that greeted me. It was my ex-husband, whom I had parted ways with 3 years ago. "Well, I never expected to run into you here. Are you taking a solo trip to wine country?" That's pretty sad. He was dressed in work clothes, sporting a scruffy beard and messy hair. I wondered if he had quit working at the travel agency. I never imagined we'd bump into each other like this. My pleasant walk was completely ruined. My ex-husband approached me with a sarcastic smile. "It's pathetic, really. All that effort for nothing." He scoffed, looking down on me. My ex-husband probably wanted to flaunt how he's happily living with a new baby from his second marriage, thinking he's on the winning side, and mocking me. And whose story might that be? I shot him a cold glare. I got the scoop from the landlord of that rental place we used to live in. "Sounds like you're in debt. After I left, some guy you borrowed money from came to collect, right? You racked up debt for expensive infertility treatments, and in the end you got nothing but a pile of bills." The man he mentioned was someone who had come asking about money when I was cleaning out the apartment alone after my divorce. Duh, you're mistaken about something. But hey, sometimes it's better to be wrong. I confronted my ex-husband with a truth that visibly clouded his expression. It was a shocking truth for him. 3 years ago, after our divorce, I was packing up our apartment when a man came by. That man wasn't a debt collector, he was actually Stephen's father. I had been told that he had run off with another woman years ago, but there he was, looking for Stephen. It seemed he had heard from someone where Stephen's married life was taking place. But by that time, we were already divorced and had canceled the lease on the apartment. Consequently, our names had been removed from the doorplate and mailbox, so his father didn't know Stephen's apartment number and asked the landlord who lived on the first floor. The father mentioned only Stephen's last name and said he wanted to meet Stephen because he had lent money. Frightened by the thought of a debt collector, the landlord contacted me right away. When I heard from the landlord about the visitor, I simply said, "Let him in, I'll meet with him." The landlord loves gossip and I was afraid of rumors spreading. So the landlord, who believed the father was indeed a debt collector, probably told Stephen the story in a dramatic way when they bumped into each other. Stephen took it seriously. The reason Stephen's father came to the apartment was to ask for money. He had been abandoned by his mistress and was in financial trouble. Desperate to find Stephen, he came to ask for money. Unaware that we had divorced, he humbly asked me for help. However, it had nothing to do with me anymore. This man was not my relative or anything of the sort. I told Stephen's father to rely on his son and gave him Stephen's contact information. After that, Stephen's father left. Hearing this story, Stephen's face turned red with rage. You gave him my contact info? Ever since then, I've been hounded by dependency inquiries. It's been a nightmare. Amidst the joyful laughter echoing through the wine country, the yelling of my ex-husband rang out. Why do I have to help that guy? He left me and Mom, didn't he? Showing up now and asking for help, that's just too much. It's no wonder my ex-husband was angry. It was completely his father's selfishness. But I had no sympathy to spare for that. And then my wife says she's sorry for having such a troublesome father, and even talked about getting divorced because of it. That's quite the sorry situation. However, for the sake of our child who's on the way, I convinced her to give our marriage another shot, and by agreeing to help out with her family business, we settled things amicably. I glanced at the name embroidered on the chest of his work clothes. From the company name, it seems like my ex-husband's wife's family runs a cleaning business. He gave up his position as the head of a travel agency branch and was now entering and exiting inns daily as a cleaner. And since his wife managed all the earnings from the cleaning business, my ex-husband didn't have a penny to spend freely. It seemed his wife had seen through his womanizing ways and wanted him out of the travel agency and under her parents' watchful eye. I was impressed with such a grounded young wife. She's got it together, doesn't she? But it's rare for a wife to make her husband live so restrictively. Is there another reason, I wonder? My ex-husband suddenly became quiet and his face turned pale. What's the matter? Are you still hiding something from me? I wasn't hiding anything. Just one thing was on my mind. I wonder if the child that's being born to you and your wife is really yours. I replied, patting my slightly swollen belly. My ex-husband looked at my belly and froze. It was as if time had stopped just for him. In fact, I was pregnant. Just like the test results showed, there's nothing wrong with my body. After the divorce, I led a life far beyond my ex-husband's imagination. That life was bliss itself. Saying that, I tried to enter the upscale hotel in front of me. Then he said, "Wait, hear me out," trying to hold me back. But I had no obligation to listen to my ex-husband anymore. We didn't ask for your cleaning services, so please don't come in. My ex-husband looked at me puzzled. What do you mean we? He asked. Who are you to this place? There's no more to discuss, but I'll leave him with one last thing. I'm the owner of this place, I said, my ex-husband's face turning pale again. My parents loved this wine country. When I was young, our family often spent time in a small hotel here in this city. That hotel, filled with our memories, had become old and run down, overshadowed by the new, larger hotel that had sprung up around it. Eventually, it faced financial difficulties and nearly had to shut down. It was my dream to buy that hotel. I saved most of my income from the travel agency, and thanks to living frugally, I finally reached my savings goal. I bought it with the inheritance from my parents and my savings, renovated it, and successfully reopened it. From my experience in the travel agency, I created an inn that feels cozy for everyone, young and old, men and women alike. The reputation of the inn spread rapidly. Now it has joined the ranks of luxury hotels, and my net worth has reached $260 million. Especially popular at the hotel is the food. Menus are tailored for each guest, and the meals are served with a personal touch. Many guests come back specifically for the food. The meals reflect the dedication of the chef, who spares no effort for the sake of others. I empathized with the chef's caring heart, and we were drawn to each other. And then I remarried him. After the remarriage, I got pregnant right away. I have no more conversations with my ex-husband. I turned my back on him. Please wait, he pleaded. Must be about money, as usual. As usual, why is he trying to stop me? To me, he is a stranger now. I owe him nothing. I have nothing more to discuss with you. Don't ever show up in front of me again. With that, I walked into the hotel. Even so, when my ex-husband tried to follow me in, he was stopped by the staff and sent outside. The sound of my ex-husband calling my name faded away and eventually disappeared. Our unexpected reunion turned out to be a crossroads for each of our futures. A few weeks later, I received a letter addressed to me. I was shocked to see the sender. It was from my ex-husband. Everything with my ex-husband was supposed to be over. Wondering what he could possibly want now, I opened the envelope with a bit of nervousness. The handwriting, packed tightly in a single sheet of paper, had distinctive quirks. It was unmistakably written by my ex-husband. The letter contained astonishing news. Here's what it said. Following our reunion, Stephen, suspecting that the reason for our infertility might lie with him, asked his wife if he was indeed the father of their child. Of course, the wife insisted it was his, but Stephen had long felt that the child was too different from him. After pressing his wife over and over, she finally confessed. The child he thought was his was actually the son of another man his wife had dated during her college days. After graduating from college and starting work at a travel agency, she quickly caught my ex-husband's fancy, and they began a sexual relationship. However, it was just a fling for her. Her real love was a boyfriend she had met during her student days. She became pregnant with her boyfriend's child and considered marriage, but once he learned of her pregnancy, he disappeared. He must have been feeling overwhelmed with insecurity about having a child so young, fresh out of college, unable to shoulder the responsibility. Terrified at the prospect of becoming an unmarried mother, the wife lied that the child was from her casual fling, who was my ex-husband, and married him to secure a financially stable life. However, after the marriage, when she found out that my ex-husband's father had run off with his mistress, abandoning his family, it echoed her own past of being abandoned by a boyfriend. So to keep my philandering ex-husband on a tight leash, she threatened him with divorce to keep his attention on her. She had him work under her parents' supervision, managed his paycheck herself, and never let him have any disposable income. Fed up with the constricting life, my ex-husband went berserk upon learning the truth. The daily arguments with his wife became incessant, and he chose the path of divorce. However, his parents-in-law, who were on his wife's side, wouldn't agree to the divorce. Still, determined to divorce, my ex-husband fled from his wife's presence with very little money to his name. Now it seems he's been drifting from motel to motel, with nowhere to live. Even when he tries to find a job, without a suit and with his unkempt appearance, he's not having much luck. It sounds like he's just getting by on day labor to afford his daily meals. He wrote that he wishes he could go back to those days. Don't make a fool of me wanting to get back together, I thought. I do pity my ex-husband's plight, but it's the path he chose. The fertility tests, the affair, and the way he scoffed at me when we reunited. He was always selfish, never considering my feelings. I'm not who I was back then. I have a bright future ahead, creating a family with my new husband and our baby on the way. I told him through a lawyer that if he ever shows up or tries to contact me, I will file for a restraining order. Then I tore up his letter. I'm due to give birth next month. The joy of meeting my baby is there, but I can't hide my anxiety about giving birth for the first time. However, my kind husband encourages me every day, always caring for my well-being, and on his days off, he helps with the housework. 'Cause he's by my side, I know everything will be okay. Today's his day off. We'll walk through wine country, soaking in the changing seasons, and then we'll take a long, deep breath in the park. It's our favorite walking route. Oh, the baby just kicked, I exclaimed. My husband quickly placed his hand on my belly and began to softly speak to our baby. This happiness isn't guaranteed. That's why it's so precious. With that thought, I took another deep breath of the fresh air in our charming town. The plane uncle is going to ride with some lady. It looks like it's going to catch fire. He really shouldn't get on that plane. The sudden exclamation from little Emily caught both husband and wife off guard, prompting a surprised huh from both. Especially me, I was doubly shocked. A plane ride with another woman? I thought he was just going on a business trip. Why does he need to ride with a woman? The reason quickly became clear. Unforgivable. To think he'd betray me and plan a romantic getaway. Ignoring the advice of better not get on that plane, John, my husband, went off to the airport anyway. So I decided to start my own revenge drama. My name is Susan Harris, a housewife in my 30s. I live with John, my husband. We're both working, so the house is often empty. We tend to spend our weekends just chilling at home, but recently John has been acting a bit strange. He's been coming home much later than before, even on weekends. He often leaves the house claiming he has important work to do. Claiming he has work. The number of times he's gone on business trips leaving the house empty for days has increased. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find John's behavior suspicious. But I haven't found any definitive proof. Besides, I was scared to stir the pot by pointing out John's behavior. So today, like every other day, I turn a blind eye to John's selfish actions, and somehow we keep our marriage going. Then one day a little visitor came to our house. It was Emily, my brother and his wife's daughter. To me, she's my niece. My brother and his wife live close by, and we often dine together and go shopping, interacting in various ways. I've watched over Emily since she was a baby, and I often visit my brother's house to play with her, so Emily has grown quite fond of me. On a day when my brother and his wife absolutely couldn't, I, having the day off, agreed to have Emily over and look after her for the day. "Auntie, let's play," Emily said with a smile as bright as a blooming flower as soon as she saw me, begging to play. I was completely smitten with Emily. "Okay, please take good care of her today," my brother said. "Count on me. I'll call if anything comes up." When I said that, my brother smiled as if relieved. Then I brought Emily home, and we spent a fulfilling day playing with dolls and baking cookies with the ingredients I had prepared. In the midst of this, I heard the door open. "Keep it down, will you? It's my day off and you woke me up," grumbled John as he came out of his room. He didn't seem to notice Emily was there and glared at me before letting out a big sigh. Generally, if you know your husband is resting at home, wouldn't you try to keep it down and let him rest peacefully? Can't you even be considerate of such trivial things? "You're really failing as a wife," he snapped. "I'm sorry for the noise, but I did tell you beforehand that Emily was coming over today, didn't I? I even mentioned it might get a bit loud." "Don't give me that excuse," John shouted back when I tried to reason with him. Surprised by his loud voice, I realized Emily, who was baking with me, looked like she was about to cry, so I quickly focused on getting John out of there. Even as John hurled terrible words at me, all I could say was, "I'm sorry." I didn't want to provoke John any further and scare Emily. Eventually, John seemed satisfied and said, "I'm gonna wash my face," disappearing into the washroom. Relieved, I turned to Emily and apologized, and she bravely shook her head, saying, "It's okay. Uncle looks like he's gonna fall," Emily suddenly said after John went to wash his face. John went to the washroom again. "Again?" I asked, and she nodded. Emily has always said strange things, almost like she can see into the future, especially about people she's close to or sees often. At first I thought it was just child's play and responded casually with, "Is that so?" However, after experiencing several instances where things happened exactly as Emily had said, I came to accept that this child must indeed be seeing something extraordinary. So, without doubting her words, I just nodded and carried on. A few minutes later, I heard a loud noise from the washroom, followed by John's angry voice. "Ouch!" Once again, it happened just as Emily said it would. John came back from the washroom, his face red, and started hurling more terrible words at me. "You could have at least cleaned the bathroom properly. Because of you, I slipped and fell." Even though I knew I wasn't the type to neglect cleaning and that the bathroom was always spotless, John's claim was clearly due to his own carelessness. It was unbearable how he was pinning it on me. "I always keep it clean. Don't blame me for your own carelessness, okay? Don't talk back to me. It's your fault, so apologize properly." His words were so unreasonable that I was utterly astounded. Despite it all being his own doing, he was pushing the blame on me, making me apologize just to vent his frustrations. I sighed at John, who was like a small child, unable to even control his own emotions. At the beginning of our marriage, John wasn't this selfish. He was rather a person who seemed to care about others. But as time went by, John began to show his true colors. He really didn't seem to care about anyone else at all. Just 1 month into our marriage, I found myself living as John's maid. I basically couldn't talk back to John, and even if I was made to do something I didn't want to, I couldn't complain. That was the rule imposed on me. If asked whether I was angry about it, honestly, I doubt I could nod in agreement. However, I dreaded making waves in our marriage and complicating our life together even more. About a week had passed since the day Emily came to our house when news of John's next business trip came in. This was his third trip this month, and this time he was not going to be back for about a week. On the day he was to leave, as I was helping him pack, my phone rang. Who could it be? It was from my brother's phone. Thinking something might be wrong, I excused myself from John and answered the call, only to find Emily on the line. She probably borrowed my brother's phone. Emily sounded panicked on the other end. I told her to calm down and listen to what she had to say, and then she dropped a bombshell. Uncle's plane, the one with a lady on it, it's going to catch fire. He really shouldn't get on that plane. Get on that plane? I was shocked for two reasons. Emily's words about the plane catching fire, and the fact that John was boarding a plane with a woman, despite being on a business trip. It was unthinkable for him to be on a plane with a woman on a business trip. What on earth was going on? It was getting me nowhere, just thinking about it, so I told John that Emily had called and said, if possible, it's best not to get on the plane. But John brushed it off. I have no obligation to play along with a child's game. Today's trip is set, there's no way I'm not going, and he left the house. He would surely head straight to the airport. Emily's predictions had never been wrong before. It's likely not going to be any different this time, and John will probably meet a terrible fate. As his wife, I probably should tell him to turn back immediately. But more than that, I was concerned about why he was getting on a plane with another woman. I couldn't help but feel like I needed to uncover the reason behind why such a situation had occurred. So I decided not to stop John forcibly and just watch how things would unfold, so I could be ready to start my own vengeance if need be. Sometime later, while I was relaxing at home, the words breaking news flashed on the television that I had left on. Curious, I saw that a plane that had just left Japan had crashed. I had a bad feeling, and upon checking, sure enough, it was the plane John was on. The TV showed images of the plane on fire, perhaps ignited by gasoline. Was this what Emily was talking about? Just as I was starting to make sense of it all, I received a call from the rescue team. John had been rushed to the hospital and was in a touch-and-go situation. They also asked about a woman who was with John, apparently in her 20s and worked nights, who had unfortunately died immediately after the accident. The rescue worker had tried to contact her relatives but couldn't reach anyone, and, as a last resort, asked me. Regrettably, I had no information about her, and had to confess as much. After thanking me for my cooperation, the rescue worker hung up. Life-saving efforts were likely still ongoing. I couldn't help but feel sorry for those involved in the accident. John was taken to the ICU. Due to the urgency of his condition, no visitors were allowed until he was stable, even family. While I should have been upset by this, I had other things I wanted to do, so it worked out for me. I properly informed both our families about John's accident. My in-laws were especially shocked, and hearing my mother-in-law break down crying over the phone genuinely pained me. But my desire for revenge is far from over. I won't be satisfied until I've dragged him through so much hell that he regrets even clinging to life. I could never forgive. I will never forgive John for treating me like nothing more than a maid while he gallivanted about and engaged in affairs. A few days later, I received a call from the hospital informing me that John had regained consciousness. His condition was gradually improving and he was moved to a general ward. I prepared myself to visit him. When I mentioned John's name at the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and said, "Ah, the one from that accident." I had been frequently checking the news and learned that the crash was one of the worst in history, resulting in many lives lost. Among them, I sensed an extraordinary will to live in John, who had miraculously survived. The nurse led me to his room where I found John asleep, connected to multiple IV drips. She informed me that he was working hard at physical therapy every day and would sleep soundly afterwards. Since John's doctor was available, we decided to talk while he was asleep, and I received a detailed explanation about his condition. The doctor revealed that John had suffered severe burns all over his body in the accident, and the impact of the crash had also damaged his spine, causing him to lose sensation in his lower body. Unfortunately, no matter what treatments are tried, the sensation in his lower body will likely never return. He can no longer walk, stand, or even go to the bathroom by himself. From now on, he will be confined to a wheelchair and is currently undergoing rehabilitation to learn how to manage daily life on his own. When John learned that he would never regain sensation in his lower body, he looked utterly hopeless about the future ahead. I had never seen John seriously commit to anything, whether it was his work, relationships, or with me. Hearing that he was diligently doing his rehab, I wondered if there had been some mistake. But John has a strong sense of pride and probably couldn't accept a life dependent on others, especially not from me. He will now have to live with disabilities, and no matter how hard he tries, he won't have any choice but to rely on others. Yet despite understanding this, he stubbornly refuses to depend on me, which almost made me smirk. The doctor provided me with materials on how to renovate the house for wheelchair access, or move to a barrier-free home, and how to better deal with John's disabilities in the future. The more I read the materials, the more I realized the gravity of John's condition, and I suddenly felt a bit sorry for him. But this predicament is the result of his own actions. If only he had listened to Emily's words and canceled that affair trip, all of this could have been avoided. It wasn't even work-related. He should have prioritized his own life. That would have probably saved the life of his affair partner as well. Due to John's poor judgment, one life was lost, and now he has to live bearing a heavy burden. I have truly realized how important it is to trust and accept. Trust and accept others' words. I've always trusted Emily and her advice, and I'm so glad I did. I'm thinking of sending Emily a thank you message later when John groaned and woke up. "Susan? Is that you, Susan? You came?" Seeing me, John looked relieved and continued to speak. "I've been lonely since you haven't visited for a while. Thanks for coming. I can't offer you anything, but make yourself at home." This was a completely different attitude from the John who used to belittle me and treat me like a maid. I wondered if the accident caused him to lose his memory, but the next words out of his mouth brought me back to reality. "Did the doctor fill you in?" "My lower half, it's not gonna move anymore. This hospital life, it's like being in hell. I hate the idea of having a stranger take care of my personal needs. I'd prefer you 100 times over. I just want to be discharged and go home." John's pride was evident. He couldn't stand being cared for by the nurses. Even though the nurses were just doing their job for him, I thought it incredibly ignorant to speak like that. And John continued with his selfish remarks. "I know I've become like this, but being with you makes me want to keep on living. So let's continue to support each other as husband and wife, okay? Continue to support each other? If my memory serves me right, we've never supported each other as a couple, not even once. John always left the household to me and went out to play. I turned a blind eye because he was tired from work, but if he's been cheating, that's a whole different story. Cheating is outright betrayal. The more I talk to John, the angrier I get. I'm overwhelmed by the feeling that I must not forgive this man, and my instincts scream to bring him down completely so he can never be so presumptuous again." Unaware of this, John suggests, "Maybe we should just move. Or, living with my parents might not be a bad idea," as if he hasn't woken from his dream. That's why I decided to make him face reality first. "Sorry, but I have no intention whatsoever of taking care of you." At my words, John's eyes widen in shock. Then, with a trembling voice full of disbelief, he scrambles for words. "Don't make such a cruel joke, please. I genuinely believe that you would accept me, help me out. But to hear such a joke, it really hurts. It's not a joke at all. I'm serious. Let's get a divorce. I can't stand the thought of continuing as your wife, after the way you behaved, not to mention the cheating, and I certainly won't be taking care of you." When I make myself clear, John seems to finally understand how I feel, and he starts to babble and panic. But that's just too much, isn't it? As you can see, I've become paralyzed from the waist down. I can't live on my own. I need you. Please don't abandon me. You're all I have. Tears well up in John's eyes. He must be serious about trying to hold on to me. Never before has John tried to face me this honestly. Even when I tried to confront the issues, he would brush me off, saying it's too troublesome, and wouldn't even engage in a proper discussion, which is essential for a married couple. But now he's suddenly saying he wants to talk, seemingly in an attempt to protect himself. But it's not for my sake, or because he wants us to work as a couple. It's just John being selfish, wanting me to remain as his maid to make his life easier going forward. I have no obligation to indulge such selfishness, and there's nothing in it for me. Would the old me, who loved John with all her heart, no matter how problematic his behavior, have listened to his words and agonized over them? Maybe if I accept John now, even if we can't support each other, we might have a different kind of marriage, a bit closer to what it should be. John has a high self-esteem and can't bear to rely on others, so even in this state he'd probably find work and try to support himself. If there's a chance to start over, it would be now. Such an opportunity won't come again. If I abandon John here, that's the end of our relationship. We'll never go back to being a couple, and he'll lose his support in me, likely facing hardship. If I leave John now, I might be dooming him to a life of wandering, lost, and alone. It's a significant decision as a person and as John's wife, but I've already decided not to go back, because the love has cooled and the trust in John is gone. Sure, if I accept him now, we might talk seriously for a while and lead a life more like a married couple. But I've grown tired from being treated like John's servant for so long. I can't bear the thought of striving for his sake any longer. Please think it over. Without you, I really can't do anything. Look at me, I can't walk or even stand. Don't just leave a guy like this alone. John's tone is earnest. He knows if he loses me now, he's finished. It was clear to me that he was desperate to keep me tied to him here, to not let me go. But still, I'm sorry. I just can't continue with you anymore, so please give up. With that, I stand up to leave. John looks at me and pleads, "Wait, let's talk." But I leave the hospital room without listening to his cries. Soon after, my divorce from John was finalized. A mutual acquaintance of John and me just happened to know about John's affair, and when they heard about John's accident, they were in a panic. They testified in court, which swung things even more in my favor. John begged me not to leave him, crying until the end, but my disgust for him had grown so strong that I couldn't stand the sight of him, and didn't take any of his words to heart. I was able to claim a reasonable amount in alimony, though it wasn't a large sum. However, John had to quit his job because of the accident, and now he's working at a company that employs people with disabilities, doing much simpler work, so his salary has decreased. He's struggling to make ends meet with the alimony payments and can't afford a decent life. John's parents disowned him as soon as the affair came to light, and they didn't care if he was in a wheelchair. They wanted him to live strong on his own from now on. As for me, I'm living a relatively happy life after divorcing John. My brother and his wife, worried about me suddenly being single, bring Emily over often, which keeps me from feeling lonely. "Auntie, let's play, let's play!" Emily's words were the wake-up call I needed. That's why I'm so grateful to her. As an aunt, I want to keep trying to be a reliable presence for her. Riding on your parents' coattails at work, and now you're just a slacker, right? No kids either. Why don't you just let go of my child? How on earth did someone like you manage to get married? What kind of dirty tricks did you use? My mother-in-law and sister-in-law never took a liking to me, always throwing snide remarks my way and slandering me without a shred of truth. It was truly exhausting. My name is Karen Williams, 35 years old. My husband John, who is turning 37, and I have been married for 7 years. Ever since my father passed away 6 years ago, we moved to a new home, and have been living there with my mother, the three of us together. John is kind, and he's been getting along well with my mother, making our home life peaceful and fulfilling. However, my career has had its ups and downs, causing me considerable stress until things settled down. After graduating from college, I worked at my father's company, where he was the CEO. But after seriously considering my aptitudes, I decided it wasn't the right fit for me, and switched jobs in the first year of marriage. It was a tough decision at the time, but looking back, I'm glad I made the change. I have 2 brothers, both of whom joined our father's company. Since my mother also worked there, it seemed only natural that I would too, eventually. The company specialized in electrical engineering, which is why I pursued and completed my degree in that field before joining my father's business. Since my whole family worked in the same place, I never doubted that was where my future lay. When I first started, I faced gossip and rumors, but I know I earned my position through hard work and dedication. My father. It was expected but still hurtful. Once my colleagues knew I was the CEO's daughter, there was a palpable distance, and I felt excluded. No matter how hard I worked, it was always seen as riding on my parents' coattails, which was frustrating. My brothers faced the same talk but proved themselves through their abilities, so I was determined not to be left behind. I worked hard to prove them all wrong and gradually climbed the ladder of success. My boss, who evaluates our work performance, didn't go easy on me even though I am the CEO's daughter. It seemed to me he was actually stricter with me than with the average person. This meant that my promotion was purely due to my efforts, and it felt great to be recognized. But even that achievement was tarnished when people said that it was because of favoritism, which really got me down. 3 years after joining the company, I met my husband, and as we grew closer, I became particularly disliked by the female staff. He worked for a firm that did business with my father's company, and was well liked for his competence and personality. His substantial income also made him quite a catch in the eyes of many women. I had met my husband before we saw each other at work. I used to see him often at the bookstore and the library I frequently visit. Since we bumped into each other so much, we got to the point where we'd occasionally chat, and we were both surprised when we ended up meeting at work. Our shared love of reading quickly led to a relationship, but this sparked jealousy among my coworkers, leading to gossip. During our relationship, I met my husband's family, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law disliked me. They'd often make snide remarks when my husband and father-in-law weren't around. "You have it easy with a job thanks to your father. It must be nice living without hardships." They believed I coasted through life on my parents' successes, enjoying a high salary because of them. However, my father would never hire someone without the skills, even if it was his own child. He's a family man and kind-hearted, but business is business with him. At work, he was strict and never mixed business with personal matters. My father doesn't play favorites just because I'm his child. If I didn't have the skills, I wouldn't have been hired. Certainly, I respect my father's capabilities as a CEO, and I hate those who belittle his judgment unreasonably. But when I voice this, my mother-in-law just won't have it. My sister-in-law, too, takes jabs at me for supposedly riding on coattails, and she seems to resent the close relationship I have with my husband. How on earth did someone as plain as you get married? What tricks did you pull off? My sister-in-law seems to have an even bigger problem with me, because her relationships never last long, and here I am happily married to my husband. My sister-in-law, who dresses impeccably in what looks like high-end fashion, certainly turns heads. But her sharp personality seems to lead to short-lived romances. I later found out that my sister-in-law went to the same college as my brother, and she had once confessed her feelings to him, but was turned down. During a family gathering, they recognized each other, and when I inquired about my sister-in-law with my brother, who seemed to know her, he told me this story. From my point of view, as his sister, my brother, whom I could boast about, is earnest and hardworking, and he's also good at showing consideration for others. Plus, he's into fashion, so I guess that's why he was pretty popular with the ladies. Knowing that such a man was my brother, my sister-in-law seemed to take out her frustration from being rejected by him, becoming harsher in her attitude. So, I made it a point to keep my distance when it was just my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Moreover, when I would go to my in-laws' place and have tea, it tasted off as if something had been added. It wasn't apparent by looking at it, but it seemed like my mother-in-law was deliberately serving me unpleasant food as a form of harassment. I thought it might be my imagination, but when I saw her smirking maliciously and ridiculing me when I pointed it out, saying I couldn't appreciate the taste, I knew it was intentional. Both of them were always sour or mean when they saw me, but put on a friendly face in front of others. I learned to navigate around them to avoid their snide remarks. With the food served at my in-laws, I would politely eat as little as possible to avoid being rude. And if you ask whether I lived happily after marrying my husband, I would say not quite. Even though my relationship with my husband was good, Getting married meant facing more gossip at work. The backtalk at work got worse than when we were dating, and with the ongoing harassment and sarcasm from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I gradually lost my spirit. I found my work rewarding, but the environment was so toxic that it made me wonder if this was okay. I found myself contemplating my future more and more. During this time, my father passed away, and my brother became the CEO, which led to me being gossiped about as the CEO's sister. Already shocked by my father's death, my spirit was completely broken. I felt I could no longer work at the company. Yet, I had always imagined I would work at my father's company, and I hadn't thought about what kind of job I might want to do now. Years of being subjected to gossip and sarcastic comments had eroded my self-esteem, and I found myself crying at the drop of a hat. Confused by my unconscious tears and not even understanding what I was sad about, I was truly at a loss. Seeing me like this, my mother and husband were really concerned. Took great care of me. Supported by these two, I slowly began to recover and even consulted my mother about the future. I've been thinking about trying a different job, but I don't really have any special skills. Is there anything I can do? Saying it out, I got depressed, thinking I had nothing to offer, and asked my mother in a disheartened voice. Then, to my surprise, my mother said, "Karen, you've always loved reading and writing stories, haven't you? I think you'd be suited for a job that involves writing." Her words jogged my memory. It was true. I've always been an avid reader, and I was better at liberal arts subjects in school. I was part of the literature club, enjoyed writing novels and poems, and was active and happy. I still love reading books to this day. So encouraged by my mother, I began to consider a career in writing. Upon reflection, I realized that a career in electrical engineering just wasn't right for me. Ever since I was a student, my mother had always told me to choose a job I loved, but back then, I didn't see it. I guess my mother understood me better than I understood myself. So I decided to make a fresh start and set my sights on becoming a novelist and began working as one. However, being a beginner, it was tough to find work, and I was chipping away at my savings. Every day I faced my computer, continuously writing. Back in the day, I was driven by the desire to prove others wrong. But now I'm working hard for myself, and despite the challenges, I find it more enjoyable. I spend more hours than I did when I was employed at a company, dedicating most of my day to crafting stories. Gradually, my income increased, and by the second year, I was making about as much as an average office worker's salary, though it was less than what I used to earn. Then in the fourth year, one of my novels won an award and even got published. This allowed me to sign a contract with a publishing house, securing a stable flow of work. By the fifth year, thanks to a hit novel, I was earning more than my husband, who has a pretty hefty salary. From then on, my work was getting adapted into comics and dramas, keeping me busy but ensuring a steady income. It's been tough getting here, but working as a novelist, I feel that my previous jobs weren't a good fit for me. But as much as being a novelist suits me, I wouldn't have gotten this far on my own. I owe a lot to the support of my mother and husband. As for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, when they heard I became a novelist, they just assumed I wouldn't make it and started making snide remarks suggesting I was leeching off my husband. After my father-in-law passed, their comments seemed to get even worse. Since I write almost at home, they've taken to calling me a nerd. And because our home is in a high-rise luxury condo, their jealousy makes their remarks even nastier. "You're just lazing around at home, living off your husband's earnings, aren't you? Must be nice. Life's easy when you don't have to work for it." They assume my husband is the one who bought our condo and covers all our living expenses. They're convinced I don't contribute financially, especially since I switched careers to become a novelist. However, the condo was actually the inheritance from my father, so my husband has nothing to do with it. Plus, the building has such great amenities that I hardly need to go out, which only strengthens their misconception that I'm a nerd. But I split the living costs with my husband, and even though I've explained this, they still believe that my husband is paying for everything. So they continue to make their comments behind his back, and I just bear it, although it's definitely stressful. They also make rude comments about how I haven't given birth to a child. This started when I turned 30, and it's just so tiresome. But now that I'm 35 and still not expecting, I'm starting to get worried myself. I was made to feel uncomfortable by two people, and despite explaining work matters to them repeatedly, they wouldn't listen and would just insult me. So I subtly sought advice from my mother and husband. When I was working at the company, I didn't consult anyone until I reached my breaking point. So learning from that, I decided to talk to them early on. But aside from my mother, since the two are part of my husband's family and act like decent people in front of him, I made sure to convey things to him in the gentlest terms possible. You don't have to deal with those two. I'll handle any meetings or communications with them. He knew about the period when I was emotionally unstable due to the backbiting, and out of concern, he tried to ensure I wouldn't have to see them more than necessary. Thanks to him, the occasions of being subjected to their snide remarks lessened, but there were still times when their malice got to me and brought me down. However, the thought that I have allies in my mother and husband quickly helps me bounce back. As for not being able to have children, my mother, who had me at an older age, assured me there was no need to rush. It's just not the right time yet. I had you later in my life, so there's no reason to worry. Do you think so? Alright, I won't stress about it too much, and I'll just wait patiently. Talking with my mother, considering my current workload and the negativity from those two, I thought I couldn't afford to have children now. So even though I felt rushed, I decided not to worry about it as much as possible. I still got snide remarks from the two of them, but my mental state was more stable than when I was working at the company. The house my father left us was well designed and well located, so I lived peacefully with my mother and husband and felt happy. Plus, with the gym equipment and workspace in the shared facilities, I could exercise and take breaks during work, which helped me get by smoothly. However, one day, my mother, who had been working energetically, suddenly collapsed and passed away from a stroke. She had gone to work as usual that day, and I had sent her off with a smile. She had no chronic illnesses, and I thought she would live much longer, so I was stunned when I found out. By the time I got to the hospital, my mother had already passed away. I stared at her, who looked as if she had just fallen asleep, with disbelief. It didn't seem real, but as I arranged for her funeral, my feelings finally settled down, and I quietly cried. I can't believe she's gone so suddenly. She was fine just this morning. My husband, knowing how lively my mother was in the morning, cried with disbelief. He had a close and long relationship with her, so he was mourning as well. While we were sad, we prepared for the wake and funeral, and we manned the reception. Seeing acquaintances come by and mourn, I realized how loved my mother was and felt consoled. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law came, and perhaps because they were with my husband, they acted somberly. But when my husband was busy with other people, they whispered to me, "With your mother gone, it's going to be tough from here on out. And since we're family, we don't need condolence money, right? Don't worry, I won't give a dime to someone who's just a gold digger." I was appalled by their insensitivity at such a time. They were stingy about the condolence money and even mocked me, saying I had been too dependent on my mother at my age. I was still in a state of shock and numbness after my mother's sudden passing, but I couldn't help but feel angry at the insensitivity of those two. Before I could respond, my husband came over, and the two of them quickly pretended to be sad and left. I was astonished at their audacity, but I decided to focus on mourning my mother rather than dwelling on their rudeness. Even after the funeral was over and I was back home, I was still overwhelmed with grief and felt listless. I sat down on the couch, still in a daze. During the funeral preparations and the service itself, I was kept busy enough to somewhat distract from the sorrow. But once home, the memories of my mother came flooding back. Thinking of how vibrant she had been made me even more sorrowful, and the sense of loss was overwhelming. My eyes and nose were sore from all the crying, but being back home made me realize just how recently she was still alive. And despite thinking I had cried all my tears at the funeral, I found myself tearing up again. I was deep in my grief, but a rational part of my mind knew that I couldn't afford to stay this way. I had a lot of manuscripts to write by a deadline. With the funeral and everything, I had already made arrangements with the publishing house, and I knew I needed to focus on my work. I knew I couldn't take advantage of their understanding any longer. My mother supported my career, so in her honor, I tried to calm my grief and resolved to get back to normal starting tomorrow. While I was doing this, I got a call from the front desk saying there was someone at the door claiming to know me. My husband inquired further and found out it was my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I wondered what they could want since we had just seen each other at the funeral. I didn't feel like seeing them, but in hopes of a distraction from my sadness, I washed my face and decided to go down with my husband. As we descended to the first floor entrance, puzzled by their visit, we were greeted before we could even speak. They said with a smile, "We're going to be living in your house from today, so show us around, please. And since this is our home now, you, a stranger, need to leave right away." We were stunned by their words, unable to comprehend. As we stood there agape, they demanded we hurry up and show them around the house. I didn't understand what was happening, but to get to the bottom of things, my husband suggested we head to a nearby store to talk it out. He was worried about showing them around the house right away. Rather than that, hurry up and show us around the house. It's ours from today on. Yes, hurry up, they both complained, apparently unsatisfied with the idea of discussing the matter anywhere but the house. The commotion began to attract the attention of other residents at the entrance, who started to wonder what was going on. Let's not cause a scene. First, please explain why you suddenly decided to live here. My husband explained that we couldn't just give them the house, because my mother's estate hadn't been settled yet. And somehow my husband managed to persuade them to go to a nearby diner. After ordering drinks, we listened to their story, and the sheer absurdity of it all made my previous sorrow vanish in an instant. That house belongs to John, doesn't it? Your mother was paying for it, but now that she's gone, rather than supporting a nerd, we might as well live there together. You should divorce that nerd you're supporting and come live with us. They seemed pretty smug about it, claiming it was a good idea. They were under the impression that the high-rise condo belonged to my husband, and since my mother passed away, they demanded that we live together. Huh? What are you talking about? My husband was bewildered by their absurd claims, which they made as if they were the most natural thing in the world. It seemed he was getting angry, especially with the insults hurled at me, but he calmly started to clear up their misunderstanding. First off, that condo is Karen's, inherited from her father, not mine. And Karen's not unemployed, she has a job. I explained that I was the owner of the condo, which was part of my father's legacy, and that I was working as a best-selling novelist. However, they wouldn't accept it. A novelist. That's hardly a stable income. There's no need to defend her, just because she's your wife, right? Defending her like that? Are you brainwashed or something? You'd better divorce her quickly. I even mentioned my works that were already popular in the media, but they laughed it off, calling it a lie. What kind of upbringing allows someone to speak like that? Didn't your mother teach you anything? You'd be better off not telling such lies. Being ridiculed about my mother and the work I've poured my heart into, I was truly getting steamed. I had been patient until now, but decided it was high time to speak up. Just as I was about to open my mouth, my husband, who had been irritably explaining to the two unlistening people, lost his cool before I did and burst out in anger. Enough already. Stop talking nonsense. Don't you ever mock Karen? The two were taken aback by my husband's rare show of fury. We've explained it time and again. How many times do I need to say it for you to get it? Karen isn't half-heartedly pursuing her writing career. With my husband's outburst, it seemed they finally began to realize that everything we had been explaining was the truth, and confusion set in. Okay, I get it. We're sorry. Let's live together then. I've already told my friends I'm moving into the high-rise condo. It's gonna be embarrassing if I don't. So let us move in. Still, without sincere regret or apology, their attitude about wanting to live with us didn't change. My husband, growing even angrier, declared, "There's no way we're living with you two. Just go back home." He seemed more disappointed than I was that his own family would suggest such a thing, his rejection of them even stronger. Panicked by his words, they began pleading with my husband to let them stay. We're in a bind here. We've already sold our family home and have nowhere to live. What? What do you mean? It turned out they had sold their house without telling us, assuming they could move into ours. They were already arranging to move and hadn't even looked for another place, starting to make wild claims out of desperation. So it's okay for you if your family is left high and dry? Just let us stay with you. I quit my job thinking I was gonna live in the condo. Their faces turned pale as they desperately implored my husband to let them stay in our house. My sister-in-law quit her job, it seems, and after constantly mocking me for being a nerd, it's pretty clear she was fully intent on leeching off my husband herself. And it's just plain rude, family or not, to show up unannounced like that. From the barrage of complaints to my husband, it was obvious they had pegged me as the villain, imagining themselves as the heroes in saving my husband from me. That's why they thought it would be a great idea to show up out of the blue, convince my husband to kick me out, and then move in together, thinking he would be thrilled about it. We'll take care of everything at home, so it's all good, right? We'd like to get a little something for doing the chores, if that's okay. They claim they will do the housework, but also have the nerve to ask for an allowance. I was utterly taken aback by their shameless attitude. I was angry at them, sure, but more than that, I began to think getting mad at them was just a waste of energy. My husband started getting even angrier with their audacious behavior. If you're going to sell the family home, why wouldn't you say a word to me about it? It's your doing, so if there's no house, that's not my problem. He flat out refused. And when they realized they couldn't persuade him, they had the gall to ask me to do it. Hey Karen, could you please talk John into letting us stay? We won't tell you to leave, and it's fine if you live with us. If things stay as they are, we're out of options. Please convince him. After all the ridicule toward me, what arrogance they had. It's my house in my name, yet they act so high and mighty. I've always detested the idea, but if I ever lived with them, I would surely be tormented. Before I could sarcastically refuse, my husband burst out again, exploding with anger. Enough is enough. After all the crap you've given Karen, you've got some nerve. Just stop asking for a share of the home sale money and go back where you came from. I don't even want to see you two anymore. And with that, he made an outright declaration of disownment. Despite their persistent attempts to cling to my husband, we ignored them, settled the bill, and promptly left the restaurant. They still shamelessly showed up at our upscale condo from time to time, unrepentant. After I explained the situation to the building manager, they were warned that if they kept making a racket, the cops would be called, and they would be sent away. But they still showed up, lurking around the front door, badgering my husband to let them move in, or to give them financial help. When my husband finally got fed up and threatened to call the police, they stopped coming around. It looks like he was serious about cutting ties. He even went through with the legal steps to disown them. But then they started sending our phones plenty of messages. Emails begging to live with us and asking for money kept flooding in. I got so fed up with the constant harassment that I immediately blocked their numbers. It turns out that their family home was too old and inconveniently located to sell for much, and they were counting on my husband without any savings of their own. So they ended up selling what they could and moved into a cheap, rundown apartment. Finding a job was tough, so they're scraping by with multiple part-time gigs, living a busy life. As for me, well, the good news of a pregnancy came through once the relentless messages stopped. I had been worried about not being able to have kids, so this was a real joy. With this happy news of pregnancy, I finally felt a glimmer of hope after a long time. I'm determined to be the kind of mother my child can always feel safe with, just like my mother. And while looking forward to the arrival of my baby, I continue to dedicate myself to my work. Lucky me, no more child-rearing expenses, let's get divorced. What? I was utterly shocked when John suddenly dropped those words on me while we were preparing for a funeral. I knew he was selfish, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. There's a woman he wants to marry, but she doesn't want kids. So what? If Charlie is alive, I'll keep losing money on child support and medical bills, right? Ah, what a relief. How often? I felt a chill run through me when I realized that this man was Charlie's father. My head cleared, but my insides were boiling. I agreed to the divorce. Yeah? Then I'll take the house, so get out as soon as you can. Just wait until the funeral's over. With that, John left. On the day of the funeral, I read Charlie's will. John turned pale, while relatives glared at him with fierce faces. It was time for a counterattack. My name is Natasha. I'm a 42-year-old housewife. I used to work in a company as a translator, but now I've switched jobs and work freelance. My husband John is 3 years my senior, 45 years old. We got married when I was 29, back when he was a client at my company. The next year, our son Charlie was born. But John was a very selfish man and hardly took part in raising him. Charlie was frail from birth, in and out of the hospital. I often felt guilty for not being able to give him a healthier body, but Charlie bravely faced his treatments and managed to hang on for 12 years. His condition worsened around the time he turned 12 during his first rainy season. He couldn't stop coughing, his body rejected food, his fever wouldn't subside. Mom, sorry for being hospitalized again. Don't be sorry. You're gonna get better, right? Yeah, I'll try my best, Charlie said with a weak smile. I felt tears welling up, but I couldn't cry in front of him. I held it in as best I could. When I called John, he didn't answer no matter how many times I tried. Maybe he was in a business meeting, so I switched to messaging. The next morning, I saw his message and called him immediately. This time, he answered right away. What's going on so early in the morning? Don't what now me? Why won't you come? Charlie is fighting so hard. My presence won't cure his sickness, right? And hey, the hospital bills must be piling up again. Tell the doctor to discharge him as soon as possible. What? How can you say that? I can't hear you. I'm off to work now. Wait, John hung up without listening to me. He had always been indifferent towards Charlie, but he had never been this cruel before. I clenched my phone, shaking with anger. Even as the rainy season ended and summer began, Charlie's condition did not improve. The doctors doubted he would make it to winter, so I reduced my work hours to be with him as much as possible. Mom, you've been with me from morning to evening lately. Is your work okay? It's fine. I'm managing everything from home, so don't worry if you say so. Charlie didn't seem convinced. He probably thought my work had decreased because of him. After that conversation, to avoid causing him any more stress, I started bringing my laptop and working right in front of him. Charlie loved books and spent most of his days reading. He also enjoyed studying and would join the hospital school when he felt well enough. I wanted to let him do anything he wished. But John, on the other hand, seemed very displeased with me. Not only did he avoid visiting Charlie, but he also constantly complained at home. Hey, is that kid still not discharged? Staying in a private room, huh? What a waste of money. How can you say that when your son is fighting so hard? Why don't you visit him for once? I'm busy, okay? You visiting him is enough. John never changed his attitude and never visited Charlie in the hospital. Even though he was Charlie's father, I knew Charlie must be feeling lonely, but I understood that forcing John to visit against his will wouldn't help, so I didn't push it further. By this time, John often came home late, reeking of alcohol. He claimed it was for entertaining clients, but the lipstick on his laundered shirts and receipts from motels hinted at an affair. He couldn't make time for Charlie, but he had time for some other woman. My love for John had run out, but I feared that divorcing him would sadden Charlie. I thought so and endured it. Meanwhile, Charlie's condition worsened. Called in by his doctor, I was told something shocking. I'm sorry, but he only has about a month left. What? Doctor, isn't there anything you can do? There's not much more we can do. As I broke down in tears, the doctor assured me we'll do our best until the very end. For about half a month, we continued treatment, consulting with the doctor, but as expected, Charlie's body weakened further. Am I gonna be gone soon? What are you saying? There's so much more you want to do, right? I encouraged him with those words, but cried in private, away from Charlie's sight. Finally, when the doctor said that further treatment was pointless, I decided to take Charlie home to spend his last moments. Are we going home? Yes, the doctor said a change of scenery for a few days would be good. Charlie's weak yet childlike response made me fight back tears. I told John about it, but all he said was, "Huh," and left the house. This man is beyond redemption. I had completely lost hope in that man. The discharge was scheduled for the next evening, so I busied myself with preparations and paperwork. While packing Charlie's belongings, he suddenly asked me, "Mom, do you love Dad?" "What?" Surprised by the sudden question, I stopped what I was doing. Charlie continued without waiting for my response. "Dad doesn't seem interested in me, or you. So if you don't love Dad, I want you to divorce and live your life." Charlie. He must have realized that things weren't going well between John and me. But as a parent, I couldn't let him worry about us until the end. I quickly put on a smile and replied, "What are you talking about? I love your dad, and he cares about us too. He's just too busy to visit, so don't worry, okay?" "But okay, I guess." Charlie didn't seem convinced, but he stopped pursuing the matter. After that, he fell asleep and I breathed a sigh of relief by his side. 2 days later, Charlie passed away at home. John never showed up until the end, and I stayed by Charlie's side, holding his hand. "Charlie! Charlie!" I cried out loud, clinging to his cooling body, remembering everything from the moment he came into my life. The doctor and a nurse who had been with us since Charlie was young came to mourn with us and explain the next steps. One of them handed me a letter from Charlie's bag. "This is from Charlie," he said, "to give it to you if anything happened." From Charlie? I received the letter, expressing my gratitude to the doctor and the nurse. I was alone without John's help, and Charlie was suffering from his illness. I can only be grateful to those who kindly supported us through this difficult time. After they left, I opened the letter beside Charlie. The content made me cry out in surprise. "What is this?" Charlie's letter contained not only his gratitude, but also something shocking. Reading it, I felt my blood boil. Even as the funeral director came to discuss arrangements, my mind was full of the letter's content. Still, I had to decide on the details for Charlie's sake, planning a small homey funeral. Then, the day before the funeral, John finally showed his face, still reeking of alcohol. I had no energy left to confront him. John, noticing my exhaustion, casually commented, "You've aged," as he took out more alcohol from the fridge to drink. "Tomorrow is Charlie's funeral. Where have you been?" "I told you I was at work. What's with all these complaints? Why did I marry such a man? No, without him I wouldn't have met Charlie." My mind was in turmoil. Charlie is no longer with us. Oh yeah, that's right. His attitude, as if Charlie was some distant relative, filled me with a simmering anger. But arguing with him was pointless. So I decided to focus on the funeral arrangements for the next day. Lucky me, no more child-rearing expenses, let's get divorced. What? I couldn't hide my shock when John suddenly said this during the funeral preparations. I knew he was selfish, but this was too much. There's a woman I want to marry, but she doesn't want kids. So what? With Charlie alive, the child support and medical expenses would drain my money. Ah, what a relief. How terrible. I felt a chill run through me, knowing that such a man was Charlie's father. As my head cleared, my anger boiled over. I agreed to the divorce. Right? Then I'll take the house, so get out as soon as you can. Just wait until after the funeral. Fine. With that, John left. On the day of the funeral, I read Charlie's will. John turned pale, while relatives glared at him with fierce faces. Now it was time for my counterattack. The will I read, written by Charlie, exposed John's affair. Until I read the will at the funeral, John had been playing the role of a grieving father, crying loudly. How could such a letter exist? No, it's not true, it's a prank. Right, Natasha? I felt sorry for not visiting because of work. But this is too much. John tried to deny it, appearing very pathetic. I silently took out an envelope from my bag and thrust photos in front of John. What? You took pictures? Troubled by being caught in a photo? Like being seen with the woman on your arm in this picture? Ah, no. As John stumbled over his words, his face still pale, I smiled sweetly and asked the relatives to pass around a few photos I had. Whispers of disgust and small cries of shock arose from all around. Despicable. Not visiting his frail son, but with this woman in such a scandalous manner. The glares at John intensified and he slumped down in his seat. I then presented John with the divorce papers. He looked up at me in shock, his voice cracking as if he was about to cry. You didn't pay attention to me because you were always taking care of him. It was just a fling. Forgive me. I don't want a divorce. Not paying attention? You're not a child. I repeatedly asked you to help me take care of him, but you always ran away, claiming work as an excuse. But taking care of someone is not dirty. As soon as John said that, he disappeared from my view, and when I looked down, he was crawling on the floor, with my father-in-law standing over him, breathing heavily. What do you mean taking care of your own son is dirty? Enough with the jokes. A parent who doesn't care for their child isn't a parent at all. You're the lowest of the low. My in-laws had always adored Charlie. They celebrated every hospital discharge with a meal, bought Charlie his favorite things, and never missed a visit. They had been covering for John, believing his excuses about being busy at work. They had never imagined their own son could be such a disgrace. Tears streaked their faces as they glared at John, who sat in disbelief, clutching his cheek where he'd been struck. Natasha, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. If we knew he was such a man, we would have encouraged you to divorce him sooner. We are truly sorry. They began to bow deeply, and I hurried to lift them up. It wasn't their fault. Charlie loved his grandparents, and their presence was one reason I hadn't divorced John. You guys are not to blame. Look, Charlie's letter says thank you and stay healthy. Charlie and I both love you very much. Natasha, thank you. Sorry, Charlie. My mother-in-law hugged me, sobbing quietly. My father-in-law was also crying, apologizing to me. John, finally coming to his senses, stood up and pointed at me, yelling, "Don't be ridiculous. She's just an old lady who couldn't even take care of her husband. A failure of a wife. John, you!" As my father-in-law lunged towards John, I stepped in front of John. He looked at me with a fearful yet defiant glare. What, you got something to say? Not really? This is reality. No one here is on your side. And make sure to pay back the money you've borrowed from many people, haven't you? How do you know about that? At my words, relatives who had lent John money began murmuring. After reading Charlie's letter, I had contacted the relatives. Charlie had overheard John's expensive activities, involving a woman from a nightclub who loved lavish things like brand products and overseas trips. John, paying for all of it, could never afford such a lifestyle on his salary alone. Realizing this, I had checked if anyone had lent him money. And to my surprise, it wasn't just John's relatives, but mine as well, under the pretense of Charlie's medical expenses. While I had initially informed them just to thank and promise repayment, with the current situation, they realized John had used the money not for Charlie, but for his affair. Don't joke with me. I lent that money thinking it was for Charlie. Give me back my $20,000 right now. Same here. I want my $40,000 back. These words set off a cascade of demands from various relatives for the money they had lent. John looked around, his face turning even paler with each claim. Then he turned to me, smiling weakly. Natasha, we're a couple, right? You'll help me, won't you? What? Are you serious? You didn't help with nursing, didn't contribute to the medical expenses or even the living expenses, and instead borrowed from everyone for your own selfish needs. Unbelievable. Why would I help you? Don't say things like that. With a pathetic voice, John slumped back down, seemingly out of energy to retort. I looked down at him, ready to deliver the final blow, and called to the entrance. Cheryl, please come in. Cheryl? Why is she here? John's face was a picture of sheer panic as he stared at the entrance. The woman named Cheryl walked towards me hesitantly. She looked plain with light makeup, a stark contrast to the woman in the photos. I invited her. On Charlie's last day she was with you, right? I thought it would be nice if she could attend the funeral. I'm sorry about this. Save it. No need for such superficial words. Cheryl closed her mouth tightly at my response. Her face was as pale as John's. I handed her some documents. I called you here today to sign these. Please read them carefully and sign. $100,000. I can't pay that. It's impossible. It's not for you to decide whether you can pay or not. Cheryl looked at me with pleading eyes, but I wasn't about to let her off easily. His gesture irritated me, but I had no intention of snapping over such a thing. Then John, trembling, stood between Cheryl and me. What now? It's my fault. So please forgive Cheryl. Demanding $100,000 from her is just too cruel. Why should I? I'm merely asking for compensation for the affair. John raised his eyebrows and sighed heavily. While screaming inside that I'm the one who wants to sigh, I waited for John's next words. That's because Cheryl is fragile, unlike you. How do you expect her to earn $100,000? How cruel can you be, John? Cheryl clung to John's back, both seemingly lost in each other. The cold stares weren't only from me. The relatives were ready to give them a piece of their mind, but I decided to add fuel to the fire. Cheryl, your son is hospitalized, right? Son! Cheryl flinched. I continued. He's 12, just like Charlie was. Always in the hospital. Your ex-husband took custody, right? Tough, with all the hospital and treatment costs, not to mention the bed fees. You must be getting quite a demand for child support, aren't you? How do you know that? Cheryl looked at me as if she'd seen a ghost. John was frozen in shock. I pulled out some documents from my bag and handed them to John. He shakily read them, then suddenly pushed Cheryl away. Hey, what's this? Divorced? With a kid? You never told me. Didn't you say the money was for your family living far away? I didn't lie. My son is my family. So I've been with a used woman? Where's the true love? You are after my money. You are only after my body. Cheryl threw her shoe at John. Enraged, John lunged at her. They started brawling like children, but fortunately, a security guard intervened. I approached the disheveled pair with a smile. John, please sign the divorce papers and arrange for the alimony. Cheryl, I won't reduce your compensation by a single cent. And your ex-husband said something about your affairs being a sickness that can't be cured. Seems like you have a few partners, so, with that kind of leeway, expect enforced payments for the child support. Treatment costs and alimony were discussed, but it seemed impossible to reach an agreement. John hung his head in silence, while Cheryl was escorted away by security, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I apologized to each relative for the disturbance, and they comforted me, bringing me to tears. Eventually, my divorce from John was finalized. We also agreed on the amount of alimony he had to pay, as I had requested. This incident greatly angered his parents, and the extended family was also outraged to discover they had been deceived. They gave him the cold shoulder, and he was asked to return the money he had embezzled. It appeared that he had borrowed it from shady sources, and now he was working multiple jobs to repay the debt. However, the amount was so large that he was rumored to have nothing left for living expenses. Last month, he was taken away by some intimidating individuals, and his parents did not even bother to file a missing person report. While I hope he is safe, I cannot help but wish he suffers unimaginable pain. As for Cheryl, all the men she dated found out about her affairs and the child she had, resulting in them cutting off all financial support. At the age of 30, she struggled to attract clients in her line of work, and eventually had to turn to her parents for help. She paid the alimony in one lump sum, but now she has been sent to work on a farm on an island, with her wages going directly to her parents for debt repayment. As for me, I moved with Charlie's memorial tablet and bought a house near the ocean, fulfilling his lifelong dream. I now live there alone with the cat he always wanted. I cherish the moments when my in-laws visit, and we reminisce about Charlie. Recently, I received another letter from Charlie, in which he expressed his gratitude and apologized for leaving for heaven first. He also expressed his wish to be my child again in another life. The letter ended with, "Mom, stay true to yourself, stay healthy, and live a long life." His words inspire me to live my life for Charlie, despite the sadness of not being able to see him grow up. I am now living each day to the fullest. You bought this high-rise condo just to live with me? I asked in disbelief. That's quite a choice for you. Well, I guess I can't help it, my ex-husband replied. I'll live with you then. That's great, his mother chimed in. Stop sulking and let's start getting along together, all three of us, from today. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The people in front of me were my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Yes, we had been divorced for a while now. My former mother-in-law, who claimed she did everything for my sake, had an egocentric personality and never cared about my feelings. She always dumped the cooking and cleaning on me. And my ex-husband, probably due to being raised by such a mother, was just as self-centered. That's why I chose to divorce him. Divorce. I moved without telling either of them my new address. And yet here they are somehow at my new place. Soon I'd find out a surprising fact. My name is Madison. I'm a 34-year-old career woman. I've been working at the same company since I graduated and have been assigned to the sales department, where I've been excelling and am now leading several projects. I got so immersed in the enjoyment of work that years went by without even considering marriage or boyfriends. Finding joy in achieving good results and climbing the corporate ladder and not being interested in shopping sprees or luxury, I managed to save up my salary and bonuses steadily. Before I knew it, I was over 30, but neither my parents nor I had any objections as I was thoroughly enjoying my life. Then a certain encounter greatly changed my life. There was a college reunion, which I attended. There I ran into Steve, who was in the same seminar as me back in the day. We hadn't talked much during our college years, but sitting next to each other at the reunion, we discovered we were working for companies that do business with each other. Steve was working in legal affairs for a top-tier company. From discussing work, we moved on to how we trained our juniors, and then our personal lives. Finding a lot in common, Steve and I started to meet alone from that day on and eventually began dating. During our relationship, Steve was very kind and a great listener, which comforted me and gave me extra motivation to work harder. Less than 6 months into the relationship, we decided to get married. My colleagues, friends, and even my parents were surprised to hear about a workaholic like me getting married, but they all celebrated us heartily at a small chapel wedding. I never imagined myself in a wedding dress even months before. But the peak of this marital happiness was on the wedding day itself. With little experience in love, I had naive dreams about married life, but the reality was harsh. On a certain day off, I fell ill and was bedridden. Steve did show concern, saying, "Just rest." "I'm hungry, though. I'll be in the living room playing games." He left the bedroom after saying that. I felt something was off, but with my dizziness and headache, I just lay there. As I was dozing off, my phone rang. "Lan? What's up?" No, I'm okay." It was a call from my mother-in-law. "Madison isn't feeling well." I could hear Steve's voice all the way in the bedroom. "Oh, is that so? Don't worry. I'll tell her to get up right away." "Yes, I'll wait." It seemed my mother-in-law was coming to visit. Despite discussing my health, I could get up, pushed myself, but I wanted to rest and recover on this day off. Despite my wife Madison feeling unwell, I could only feel sadness at Steve's behavior for accepting a visit. "Madison, get up quick. Mom's gonna come over soon," I said, trying to wake her. She said it'll only be for a little while, and it'd be pitiful to send her away. "Show your face to Mom too. You're free anyway, right? Didn't I say I'm not feeling well and want to stay in bed?" She reassured me, "It'll be all right. It's just for a bit." I couldn't understand how the situation was all right. Even so, if my mother-in-law was coming over, it's not like I, as her daughter-in-law, could stay in bed. I had been bedridden since the morning, so no cleaning had been done. The mess from last night's dinner, the cluttered living room, and even the laundry had been left untouched. Steve never lifts a finger to help with the housework. Somehow, I managed to get up and do the cleaning and tidying in the 1 hour before my mother-in-law arrived. All the while, Steve just continued playing his games, unfazed. It was quicker to do it myself than to be hindered by his half-hearted help, but I wish he had at least shown the gesture of offering to help. By the time I had done the bare minimum cleaning and gotten myself ready, my mother-in-law arrived. Steve greeted her cheerfully. "Mom wants tea. It's almost lunchtime, so could you take care of lunch for me and Mom?" "You're gonna eat, right, Mom?" She replied, "Yes, I'll have some. I brought your favorite strawberry cake for dessert, so let's eat it together." And just like that, no consideration was given for how I was feeling. The conversation between my husband and mother-in-law unfolded as if I wasn't there, and I sat beside them, enduring a headache and dizziness. In the end, my mother-in-law didn't leave, even by evening, so she stayed for dinner too. I started preparing without showing any irritation. Finally, After she left for an appointment with her friends in the evening, I collapsed into bed without exchanging a word with Steve or cleaning up. Originally, Steve always put his mother first and often prioritized her wishes. Since his father had already passed away, he would say, "I'm worried about Mom. She must be lonely," and frequently visit her place. He also never missed an opportunity to give her gifts with each season. At first, I thought it was sweet how he cared for his mother, but I was mistaken. His mother was always his top priority. Her word was law, and the number of nights he spent at her place just kept increasing. It was always about her. It was always about Mom, for Mom with Mom. Whatever it was all about Mom. Yes, Steve was what you'd call a mama's boy. Comparing me with his mother became the norm. Moreover, every time they went out, it was always to his mother's house. Just 6 months into our marriage, my husband was already neglecting me, spending all his free time with his mother. His mother seemed to adore her son excessively, and though I had dreamed of a happy married life, I soon found myself increasingly alone as her presence loomed larger. There was a reason why the mother-in-law couldn't let go of her son: money. She had a significant spending problem. It wasn't just coffee or outings with friends. She spent money on travels and brand-name shopping sprees. Because of this, she frequently hit up Steve for money. "This month, I only need $2,000, she'd say without a hint of shame, and Steve would always hand it over without hesitation. Then, her requests for money started affecting me, too. "Madison, I need you to prepare $4,000 by tomorrow." "What? What do you need $4,000 for?" "I'm going on a trip next month, so I'm counting on you." I was shocked by a demand I'd never even gotten from my own parents. Raised with strict rules about lending and borrowing money, I was utterly taken aback by her assumption that not paying back was the norm. "That's impossible." I refused. I didn't give her a single penny. "It's not like I'm asking you for a gift." "Don't be so stingy." "Fine, Steve will give it to me." Every time she asked, Steve would just give in. That's why she doted on him so much. "Mom's in trouble. It's only natural to help her out a bit." That was Steve's response whenever I brought it up. Steve earns a pretty penny, I'd say. We're both working, so each month we pitch in a set amount and manage our own money beyond that. I have no clue how much Steve saves or what he spends it on, but the couple $100 his mom was asking for has ballooned into a couple thousand. There might be financial dealings happening that I don't know about. At this rate, it could start affecting our household finances. "Hey Steve, don't you think we should increase our savings each month, considering the future? For the kids we might have, and eventually I'd like us to buy our own house. If I had that kind of money, I'd give it to my mom." "Madison, you should chip in and help my mom out each month too." That was his reply. I bet he isn't saving a dime. When I show up at my in-laws to my mother-in-law, I'm just a maid who works for free. The house my father-in-law left behind is quite impressive and spacious. I'm tasked with everything from cooking, cleaning, to gardening and window washing. Still being married, I complied. Without complaining, "Madison, I'm really sorry to ask this of you every time. I just can't clean anymore since my legs have gotten weak." The woman who gallivants daily, what is she even saying? I smiled politely at my mother-in-law while muttering this in my heart. She just enjoys bossing me around. My oblivious husband neither helps me, nor does he see the need to, believing instead that his mother is toughening me up to be a good wife, thinking she's incredible for it. Then Steve said something unbelievable. "It seems like Madison's mom didn't have much time to take care of her. Show her how to clean and cook, will you? Teach her the ropes." Sure, my parents ran a rice mill back home and were busy every day. But even so, my mom always made time for me. And my dad too. They could have had me help out, being an only child and all, but they let me play and pursue my interests. "Children aren't tools for labor. Do what you love," they'd always say. So different from my mother-in-law. Finally, I stood up to Steve, for the sake of my parents who cried tears of joy at our wedding, and for my own sake. "What are you talking about? My mom took great care of me. Don't you think there's something wrong with what your mom is saying? Can someone who's too frail to clean go out and travel every day? She's just shoving her housework onto me. I refuse to do your family's chores anymore." I don't want to come here again. However, the response I got from Steve was filled with anger. How can you say such awful things about my mom? She's just trying to make me into a proper wife. You're demonizing her without a shred of gratitude. If you're gonna talk like that, we might as well get a divorce. With that, Steve yelled in my shock. He pulled out a divorce paper from his bag, filled it out, and threw it at me. How about that? I'm serious. If you apologize to me and my mom, maybe I'll forgive you. If you don't want to get divorced, apologize right now. That's right, you'd be the one in trouble if Steve left you. Apologize now. He's rooted in old-fashioned values. In his world, a wife is below her husband and mother-in-law, expected to obey their every command. Standing up to one's husband is unthinkable. He assumes that threatening divorce will make a wife beg with tears and apologize. But I was certain this marriage was no longer bringing me happiness, nor was it going to get any better. Seeing me silent, Steve smirked and tucked the divorce paper back into his bag. Reflect on this while I'm away on my business trip. The next day, as Steve left for his trip, he left the divorce papers on the table. I wasted no time and signed my name before rushing to the courthouse to file them. I then called my job and took some urgent personal days to start reverting to my maiden name and sorting out my affairs. I wanted to wrap up as much as possible while Steve was away. On the day the divorce was finalized, Steve came home. I've already filed for divorce, I said as I handed him the envelope from the city hall. His face turned bright red with anger and he yelled, "Do you really want to put us through all this trouble? Divorce isn't something you just do on a whim. Submitting divorce papers just because you didn't get your way is beyond a joke. It's too much." It seemed like he thought I had filed for divorce on a mere whim. I decided to play along with his words. "Well, it's because you always prioritize your mom over me. I'm never a part of the conversation even when we're all together. I'm always alone, feeling lonely. Why do you exclude me?" Although I was only pretending to sulk, it seemed to have an effect on him. He loves it when women appear to be needy towards him. Despite the audacity of my act, I must have seemed like a seasoned actress to him. My husband, completely led on by my performance, cheerfully agreed to a financial settlement that was to my advantage. He thinks that after I've calmed down, we can just get remarried and return to our old life. But my feelings for him are gone. I divorced him to take care of myself. There's no going back to life with him. Regarding the usually troublesome matter of the financial settlement in a divorce, my husband didn't argue and let it end in my favor, and once everything was settled, I left the house. While I was looking for a new place, I fell in love with a high-rise condo near my workplace and decided to buy it after much deliberation. It's a new start in life. I wanted a bit of luxury in my home so I could enjoy my time alone, which is exactly what I'm doing now. After a day at work, I come home to my own space. With no one to take care of or accommodate, I've taken up my old hobby of knitting. I brew my favorite tea and knit before bed, which is a truly relaxing and enjoyable time. Then one day, my ex-husband and former mother-in-law showed up at my condo. Of course, I hadn't given them my address. I couldn't find the right words over the intercom and remained silent as my mother-in-law caused a scene at the entrance, calling out my name. To avoid bothering my neighbors, I reluctantly let them in through the front door. "How did you know where I live?" I asked, surprised. "Oh, we hired a private investigator. I forgot to ask you where you moved. We were worried about how you were doing, and Mom had it looked into," he said as if it was the most natural thing in the world. After a divorce, there's no way I would tell them where I moved. Yet here they were using a private investigator to intrude upon me. I felt a chill down my spine. I was desperately thinking about how to get rid of this parent and child. The mother, acting like a young girl despite her age, was shamelessly peering into my house, craning her neck and squatting to get a better look. Just as I was about to scold her, she blurted out something unexpected. "It's not as shabby as I thought. Did you buy this high-rise apartment to live with me? You chose a nicer place than I expected. Well, I guess I'll have to move in with you." "Great. No more sulking. From today on, we'll all live together happily," my ex-husband chimed in with a grin. "What? What is she talking about? Move in here? I was dumbstruck. The idea that they were proposing to live with me hadn't crossed my mind, and I couldn't understand why they would say such a thing. I was left pondering how to respond. The smile on my mother-in-law's face was unnerving. Next to her, my ex-husband was smiling ear to ear. That's the best choice indeed. He found himself agreeing with my mother-in-law's opinion. Madison, it must be lonely to live here all by yourself forever, right? That's why I came with Mom today. I'll let bygones be bygones. I'll forgive you. You must have reflected on it, and from today on, we'll live here, the three of us. My ex-husband proceeded with the conversation as if it was a done deal. The two of them looked at me as if it was a matter of course, but it was clear from their expressions that they were dismissing my wishes. My words didn't reach them at all. I absolutely refuse. Please leave immediately. I don't mind if you never forgive me. You are now strangers to me. Our ties have been severed. Please do not come back again. I responded firmly. My ex-husband was taken aback, likely expecting me to readily agree. What? Why? You're serious? You bought this place wanting to live with Mom, didn't you? Don't say such things, please. And here I thought I was doing this for your sake. They must have been expecting a completely different reaction. They couldn't hide their surprise at my rejection. Whatever misunderstandings you have, I don't know, but I bought this condo for myself. Please stop with your arbitrary interpretations, I said. I'm saying I'll forgive you. It seemed in my ex-husband's mind I was still being stubborn just to cause them trouble. He began to show an arrogant attitude as if he was doing me a favor by forgiving me. If things stay like this, you'll end up living alone here for the rest of your life, with neither me nor Mom around. Do you understand? You're gonna be all by yourself forever? Yes, that's what I want. You're not welcome in my home. Please leave. We are no longer family. The relationship is over. Don't ever come back. I stated clearly, but it seemed not to penetrate my ex-husband's understanding. He must have thought I was too stubborn to back down. His actions were self-serving, twisting the situation to his liking, without attempting to understand my words. He scoffed at my words, and when I tried to close the door, he pushed past me to enter the house. Being pushed by my ex-husband, a man, I was helpless and fell into the hallway. I let out an unexpected loud scream. After a while, a neighbor opened their door. Realizing this, my ex-husband and his mother tried to hurry inside the house. With a puzzled look, I pleaded to the neighbor, "Please call the police." "What are you saying?" For me, this was trespassing. I called 911 myself. "Come quickly, please." Because the call came from the same location, the police car arrived promptly. "Come in." The neighbor, to protect me from my ex-husband, kindly let me into the entrance and locked the door. "Are you okay?" they asked me gently. My ex-husband banged on the door violently, shouting, "No, it's not like that. I'm the husband. I just came to visit my wife." My mother-in-law was also raging in the hallway. "Hey, don't touch Mom. Madison, say something. It's because you wouldn't even give us your address that we had to go digging around for it." "Oh, you. Not only did you tarnish my son's reputation, but you had to treat me this terribly too? What a terrible daughter-in-law you are. Apologize right now." The incredible volume of their voices echoed down the hallway. Given that it was a weekend morning, it's likely that many residents were home. One by one, doors began to open, and the commotion escalated to the point where onlookers started to emerge. Fortunately for me, though I was new to this apartment complex, I always made sure to attend the meetings and was known for being considerate despite my youth, so I had already established a relationship of trust with the other residents. Despite the disturbance caused by my ex-husband's sudden appearance, I wasn't shunned. Instead, everyone was kind, asking if I was all right and if I needed help. Just give them a shout. Based on testimonies from neighbors and other local residents, my ex and his mother were taken away by the police for trespassing. The neighbor who I had asked to call the police despite being inconvenienced said, "I work in the legal field, so I know a lawyer who's an expert on stalking. I'll introduce you," and he did just that. Come to think of it, my ex-husband used to work in legal affairs too, but he seems completely oblivious to the laws he's breaking. I bet he'll never realize it. A few weeks after the incident, an old friend from college reached out to me. She said she saw my ex-husband walking happily with a young child. It was a message asking when he had the kid. Since I hadn't informed her of my divorce, she assumed the child was mine. It hasn't been that long since the debacle. Could it be that my husband, who was supposed to be reconciling with me, has found a new lover already? That's his prerogative, and it has nothing to do with me. If he has a new lover, perhaps his obsession with me will fade. But a young child snagged my attention. Would my mother-in-law ever approve of a romance with a woman who already has children? I asked my attorney to conduct additional investigations to uncover his background. A reputable detective agency arranged through the law firm took on the task of investigating my ex, and then I was informed of the shocking result. My ex had been cheating on me long before our divorce. Though my feelings for him had long since vanished, I never imagined that he had been betraying me from the start. I thought all the weekends he spent with his mother, staying at his parents' house, leaving our home empty, were for family obligations. I was told so, and seeing how his mother acted, I had no reason to doubt it. But in reality, he was probably going to see his mistress. I could feel my heart in turmoil. To my ex-husband, all women are inferior to him, except for his mother, who reigns supreme in his life. He thinks it's okay to ridicule or scorn any other woman, including me. While having a wife, the act of cheating, as well as convincing himself it's only right to get back together with his divorced wife, stems from him painting things in a light that suits him. Even as he's pressuring me for reconciliation, he's still seeing his mistress. In his mind, this situation makes perfect sense. As I pore over the investigative report, it indicates that despite having no intention of marrying, he's been leading his mistress on with talks of a future. He's been keeping her hopeful to maintain their affair. And then there's the young child he was seen walking with, the legitimate child of my ex-husband born by his mistress. Yes, he had two families. The child was born around the time he and I were married, and I was completely unaware of anything. The report made me feel shocked and betrayed. It made me feel more nauseous than sad or angry. Following my attorney's advice, I immediately switched to filing for damages due to the affair. If it has been within 3 years of discovering the infidelity, one can file a lawsuit. There's no time to wallow in sadness or anger. My feelings for him are long gone. I cannot afford to waste any more time on such a person. I mechanically proceed with the preparation for the appeal. Simultaneously, I am suing the mistress for damages due to her infidelity. Upon learning of my ex-husband's mindset, who has not given up on reconciling with me while still implying marriage to his mistress, Emily is furious. I will sue for marriage fraud. He will never see the child again. But just hinting at marriage is unlikely enough for a lawsuit. I thought I would probably end up just crying myself to sleep. But to my surprise, it turned out he had taken a significant amount of money from Emily, claiming it was for their wedding fund. And of course, the money ended up with my mother-in-law. Her spending habits are out of control, and her demands are ever escalating. Steve was trying to appease his mother, who was upset with the complications between us, by granting her the dream of an overseas trip on a luxury cruise ship. He reserved the best room and had also booked the most luxurious hotel. The money he had received from Emily was used to cover those expenses. Once she learned this, Emily managed to bring about a legal case. I am claiming damages for the affair, child support payments, and now he's being charged with fraud. My ex, who was always begging his mother for money, had no savings. I heard he incurred a substantial debt. Their grand family home was seized, and yet his debts only grew. He paid me my damages in one lump sum, and now we are completely estranged. However, the situation between Emily and my ex is slightly different because they have a young child together. He had agreed to pay child support every month, but those payments soon fell behind. Enraged, Emily stormed into his workplace, revealing everything. Despite dealing with legal issues, he was causing trouble with women at work, and amidst a fraud trial, he had kept this hidden from his company. When Emily burst in, everyone found out, and he was quickly shunted aside to a less important position, and unable to stand the whispers, he resigned on his own. With debt repayment and child support looming, he desperately looked for a new job, but found that his reputation in the industry, now tainted with fraud charges, made it impossible even to get an interview. Realizing he cannot be picky, he is now juggling 3 demanding physical labor jobs, working himself to the bone with barely any sleep. As for his mother, seeing her son sued and jobless with a mountain of debt, she vanished to avoid getting involved. His mother abandoned him and disappeared. My ex-husband is on the brink of despair. Of course, his mother's story isn't over. Unable to curb her spending, she too has racked up considerable debt. Without a home, she's found herself borrowing easily, but facing harsh repayment conditions. Soon falling behind, she's now working tirelessly, constantly under the watchful eye of some unsavory characters. Meanwhile, I'm diving into my job as a sales manager. Taking on new projects, I'm achieving groundbreaking results, and now, with a life of my own, I can even make time to study. My growing expertise has won me the trust of clients and led to a surge in company sales. I've been promoted to the first female executive at the company, and there's even talk of me rising to higher positions. I'm not letting it get to my head, though. I'm working hard and looking to keep contributing to the company. Now single, I've been receiving a lot of blind date invitations from friends, but I'm turning them all down to focus on my hobbies and studies. Since it's my own life, I want to devote it to what I love and live with my head held high. Also, I do hope that someday I'll meet someone with whom mutual respect is possible, but for now I'll keep that thought tucked away in my heart.